Thank you, Kaiju Lovers. We're back with another recap of our new favorite, man, I definitely didn't see that coming, show, Monarch. I'm your host, Anthony, and I'll do my best to be your guide in this blockbuster show as we're picking up where episode 1 ended with Kate and Kentaro making up for lost time as bickering siblings Bart and Lisa and of the mystery of their missing father, who just so happens to be the son of Kong Skull Island character Bill Randa, who, in the film, was played by John Goodman. That's not all that happened in that action-packed first episode. More bombs were dropped, no pun intended, when we learned more about the life of Bill Randa before Kong Skull Island, and we're beginning to uncover the legacy that his grandkids are inheriting as their family is tied to their history of mankind's earliest recorded interactions with the Titans. This episode is titled Departure, which fits because it hints at a few different moments of departure, including Kentaro dipping on his mom and leaving her behind, older Shaw and company contemplating making a run from it from Monarch, younger Shaw ditching Keiko and younger Bill in the middle of the jungle when Bill wants to tag along. This episode has so many great moments to break down and revisit, and I can't wait to jump into this episode with you all. But first, do me a favor, if you're new here, please consider giving this channel a like and subscribe to keep up with our weekly Monarch analyses and breakdowns. I'm truly deeply grateful for you to allow me to have your time. I truly understand how valuable that is, and I would be grateful if you could also please hit that like button. Please hit that like, please, like for real, hit that like button. YouTube still uses this to help smaller channels like me to grow, even in 2023 going into 2024. Please like, subscribe, turn on notifications. This way you're able to watch these videos right after they're published every week in order to keep up and help us trying to figure out the mystery of Monarch, Legacy of Monsters. I really appreciate it. Thank you. This episode opens up with a history lesson of Leland Shaw's reputation and record within the Army as he serves as a U.S. Army soldier in Manila way back in 1952. We learn that Leland is a pretty stand-up guy and is willing to put his reputation and his career on the line for what he thinks is right when he stands up for a woman getting harassed by 2 other soldiers. Shaw refers to these other soldiers as bullies, and we see that Shaw ain't no punk and can throw hands with the best of them, and we also learn that he has a deep respect for the Army, and he's following in the footsteps of his father, who also served. We also see how Shaw was assigned to escort a Japanese scientist, as this was mostly a disciplinary action for throwing said hands at said fellow Army dudes in a bar brawl. Shaw isn't really on board with the assignment, but he must not have had much of a choice. We then switch to Shaw exiting a boat on the Mindanao docks as he begins his search for Dr. Mira. Now, real quick, I'm seeing more TV shows that feature at least a portion of its storytelling as flashbacks to when America was great. Now, for those of you who watch my Loki recaps, you know I applaud the authenticity of touching on the undertones of the time, but I got to admit that this just, like in that show, these moments in Monarch make me squirm a little in my seat. Every time Shaw opens his mouth in this episode, I get a little anxious because I have no idea what's about to come spewing out. And man, does he spew out some BS from time to time. Shaw is in tip-top form in this moment as he casually insults and undervalues the woman in front of him, as his mind simply can't accept that the Japanese scientist Dr. Mira that he's assigned to escort is in fact a woman. And kudos to Dr. Mira for taking it in stride and trying to give this dude a chance to save himself from looking like a jerk by dropping blatant hints that she is the Japanese scientist Dr. Mira that he was assigned to escort. And my guy is still dumbfounded and in disbelief that this is the person that the whole army of the United States of the America sent him to escort and protect is this little Japanese woman, Dr. Mira. And I guess shout out to Wyatt Russell for his ability to nail it in these roles as the insensitive, tone-deaf jerk. Like, my guy is a 10 out of 10 in this kind of role, and he really nails it. His character is still a piece of but he's a well-acted piece of ish, because even after this woman spells it out for him that she's Keiko Mira, the only logical conclusion he comes to is that this woman must be the daughter of the man that I'm sent here to escort, because I'm looking for a Dr. Mira. Dr. Mira finally gets sick of this shit and walks off after rudely bursting his bubble that she's the person he's looking for. We then switch to Dr. Mira giving Shaw all the best he deserves and does some white-knuckle driving in the countryside with Shaw on the passenger side and forgetting to check if he's wearing a seatbelt. And let's be honest, Shaw deserves it, so it does feel good to see Dr. Mira make him squirm a little. They make some small talk about some radiation readings that Dr. Mira is investigating. Shaw is able to put on a little bit of charm to make up for being an ass earlier, but not enough. We then switch to Tokyo 2015 and we see Kentaro starting his day with on-brand promotion with his iPhone alarm. We also see Kentaro seemingly start heading in the direction of the crowd and going to work outside his house, and then we get a good shot of him changing direction, going against the crowd, and instead heading to his father's office where they found his grandfather's Monarch bag last episode. Kentaro decides to do some emotional redecorating, and in the middle of his organizing, he has a light bulb moment to try some of the keys on his father's keyring to open the filing cabinet. He gets it open and finds some documents and records about Leland Shaw with all sorts of clues on Shaw's career and possible whereabouts. There's even a roll of old movie time projector film with the name Philippines left labeled on the side. We then switch back to Keiko and Shaw in the Philippine jungle as they unpack equipment, and somehow Shaw manages to find new ways to be ignorant. He says some racially insensitive comments and then says the most meta thing I've heard in a while when he goes, "What, you want me to lie and pretend that's not the way things are?" And shit, Keiko is better than me, because it's in that moment it would have been Street Fighter 3 right here, right now. They somehow have restraint and don't fight each other, but instead hear noise coming from the jungle that makes us all concerned. What's worse is that Lieutenant Shaw's corny ass disappears right as the noise is getting closer. We then see who we know to be Bill Randa coming out of the jungle and approach Dr. Mira by surprise with Captain Commando's goofy butt only coming out of the jungle with his strap after Dr. Mira could have had her head ripped off and after he saw the coast was clear. Shaw and Randa introduced themselves like gentlemen shooting things, with Randa being extra sus as he comes out of the woods acting all sketchy and touching stuff. They agree to a ceasefire for now, with Randa beginning to explain his intentions. We then switch back to Japan with Kate making her way through these Japanese streets with what looks like someone following her without her knowledge. Kate goes a few blocks oblivious to her tail and makes her way to a Japanese train station where she gets another call from her poor, neglected mother, who always has to call first. Mom wants to know what's going on in Japan, with Kate brushing her off as usual while also throwing jabs at her absentee father to her mom before hanging up on the phone. On her mom. Hanging up. And real quick, am I the only one who finds it a little weird that we haven't actually seen Kate's mom? Like, we hear her call and see how much her daughter loves her, but we never actually see her. Anyway, as Kate is minding her business, not looking to make friends, a random bearded American dude in a business suit approaches her and feels fully entitled to just start talking to her and disturbing her peace, with Kate trying to politely ask him to fuck off. But this guy thinks no means yes, and even makes it more uncomfortable when he brings up coffins, because, you know, how could you not bring up coffins in a casual conversation? After he makes the whole thing even more awkward, the guy finally comes clean and admits that he works for Monarch, and he's there for the files. This freaks Kate all the way out, but she hides it like a G and leads this dumbass outside in public, where she's able to Cardi B her phone into this dude's face and make a run for it. Unfortunately, Kate doesn't make it far because Rhea Ripley hits Kate with an armbar and throws her in the back of a car right before they pull off. Things go from bad to worse for Kate when they decide to put a bag over Kate's head to stop her from seeing where they're going. And it's even worse for these chumps when Kate starts having a full-blown panic attack due to the fact that she suffers from PTSD from when she survived the Godzilla attack in San Francisco. Kate accidentally kicks the women's champ in the face, causing her to lose control of the car, and they go a-tumbling. Onlookers see the crash and are in too much of a shock to come help, and Kate makes her way out of the car by herself and starts to make a run for it in the crowd of people. The brawny man finally crawls out of the car and doesn't get any help from the crowd either. We then switch to Kentaro, heading over to May's house, thinking he had enough pull with her to help him play back the footage he found. May is sorry she's not sorry, tells Kentaro to touch grass, and then heads back into her room to finish going through his stuff. Kentaro asked her for the files back, but May is waist deep in cracking the files, and she's not about to stop now. We then switch back to Kate, who's trying to file a police report about the brawny man and Rhea Ripley, who tried to kidnap her. The first thing the police want to know is if she's American and if she has any identification. Kate thought it was smart to throw away her phone and leave her ID back at the train station. The officer taking her report then proceeds to ask her probing questions, making it sound like Kate might have had too much to drink and maybe she's confused and... What? Why on earth? Wait, he, in all his wisdom and experience, heard this woman say she was almost kidnapped by strange people, and his first theory is that she's been drinking? What? Like, yo, is it me? Maybe it's me. Listen, I've never been to Japan, and I will admit that I don't often drink Japanese liquor, but my people, can you please tell me, is the liquor there really that different? She don't even seem drunk to me, but what do I know? What do I know? Either way, this kind of makes me feel uncomfortable because nobody wants to see a woman get victimized, go to the authorities for help, and the authorities kind of dismiss your experience. People want to believe that they will get help when they seek help, period. Anyway, Kate realizes she's not going to get any help when the officer advises her to go wait at the American embassy and decides to get while the getting is good. We then switch to Kentaro walking into his home and putting on his anime slippers. Now, I feel like I should know the characters on his slippers. I feel like I should, but it's at an awkward angle, and I gotta admit, it's been a very long time since I dove into anime, and I might need some help. Do any of you watching know who these two are? Help me out with this one, and I got you with a shout out in an upcoming video. Anyway, Kentaro gets comfy and sits on the couch with the clothes he wore on the train and finds his mom looking at old family photos of his dad. Kentaro doesn't understand why his mom isn't angry, and she takes it personally and decides to take part in the ancient ritual of destruction in order to release her internalized anger and begins ripping apart the old photos. Kentaro then comes across an old photo of Leland Shaw, which he should recognize from his father's files that he found earlier that day. We then switch back in time to Shaw, Randa, and Keiko back in the jungle in the Philippines, sharing their reasons for being in the jungle. Randa says he's following the trail by following the legends, and Keiko is here following the radiation. They seem to be chasing the same thing, but Shaw is not at all interested in having another tag-along on this trip. Keiko insists that Randa stays and tells Shaw that if he don't like it, then he can get to step it, and shows him the door. Shaw is with it, actually, hops in the truck, and chucks the deuces at these two. We then switch to see Randa sharing more information, including mentioning the name Mutos, which is what Monarch lovingly calls the Titans, massive, unidentified terrestrial organisms. Keiko and Randa continue sharing information and also discover that the tracks that they're following on their paper maps are exactly the same. And for them, it confirms that they were looking for the same thing, but we, the audience, knew that all along. It's about time they figured it out, actually. We then see Randa and Keiko make their way through the jungle into a clearing where they walk into a valley with a massive battleship on land? Yo, what in the J.J. Abrams is going on right now? How did the boat get here, and why is the answer that King Kong tossed it? We don't stick around because we then switch back to 2015 Japan, with Kate making her way through these streets while suffering temporary homelessness, and she's able to trace her steps back to May's house, where she also hopes to find the magic words to get May to help her. The problem is that those Monarch wrestlers are already there and are combing through May's stuff. May then shows off her impressive stealth skills by effortlessly becoming the second person to casually snatch Kate up off her feet against her will today. But at least this time, it's definitely for her own good. May and Kate then make their way out of there without making a sound. We then switch back to Kentaro and his mom, still going through old photos and talking about the photo of Lieutenant Shaw. Kentaro asks if Lieutenant Shaw is still alive, but Kentaro's mom isn't sure. It's at that exact moment that Kentaro both gets a text, "Call me, it's important," from May, and a ring at the front door from someone ringing my bell way too aggressively for me to answer politely. Kentaro opens the door to see the Judgment Day, aka Wolfman Jack and Rhea Ripley, using their American privilege to invite themselves into someone else's private home. Once they're inside, the Americans start talking tough and try bullying Kentaro into handing over the files he found in his father's office. Mom peeps game and does the thing that moms do when they talk with their eyes. Like, you ever have your mom talk with her eyes to you? It's when she says one thing verbally in front of company, but her eyes say a whole nother message that only you understand. Mom sends Kentaro upstairs to give these nice people the files that they're asking for, while she shows her hospitality and offers them some tea. The Americans don't really have much patience and start being nosy to pass the time, and that's when they realize that Kentaro's dad is Kentaro's dad. I mean, like, they knew that Kentaro and his friends had the files, but what they didn't know was that Kentaro was the son of the dude who was hiding their files. This is when the light bulb turned on over that Monarch dude's head, and we see he realizes that his tactics didn't work. And even here's Kentaro making a run for it, because in this building, he lives in a duplex that has a whole nother entrance to the place on the second floor. And I didn't know how much I wanted something until I saw that scene. Anyway, Kentaro disappears outside and makes a run for it. But the problem is that this punk left his mom behind with the Judgment Day. And we see Kentaro making a getaway too, and then get a text from May of the noodles emoji. We then switch to Keiko and Bill Randa making their way to that massive battleship that I totally forgot about. Bill identifies the ship as the USS Lawton and talks about how the ship went down 200 miles west of Pearl Harbor in 1943, which is 5,000 miles away from their current location. So how did it get here? We see Bill and Keiko enter the ship with Bill documenting the whole thing with his video camera. They make their way into the ship when Bill darts off, heads into some room, and starts rummaging through a chest full of old stuff, when we discover that Bill was one of the sailors that served on this ship. And that part of Bill's motivation for this investigation is that he was the lone survivor of the ship going down. And he wants to find evidence as to what caused his ship to go down and eventually end up here. We then switch to see Shaw driving through the countryside when he miraculously sees these visual flourishes in the sky, looking like they're in a similar shape to those maps that the scientists were following, and I bet that's our radiation in the sky. We then switch back to 2015 Japan, where we see May and Kate heading into some noodle restaurant and heading straight to the back, where May has a locker with her go bag. May grabs her stuff and heads out just in time to run into Kentaro, who's glad to see May, but definitely not glad to see Kate, and gives her a, "What are you doing here?" And god dang, that felt cold. Like, damn, he hates Kate. May tries sticking up for Kate and gets Kentaro to back off, sharing that someone is after those files. May wants to make a run for it with her passports and money, and Kentaro instead pulls out his photo of Lieutenant Shaw and says he has a better idea. We then switch back to 1952 Philippines, where we see Bill and Keiko entering further and further into Bill's old naval ship, the USS Lawton. They finally get to a point when they find what looks like the crew of this ship not alive, but preserved in some weird-looking jelly, with Bill confirming that the ship went down 9 years ago, and leaves me thinking that these guys should look way further along than that. They also realize that more of that jelly is appearing by the second, and even in places it wasn't at just a second ago. We then switch back to 2015 where we see Kentaro, Kate, and May visiting what looks like an assisted living facility for the elderly. The gang makes their way remarkably far without setting off any red flags, and are even given free rein to enter and get a face-to-face with Ego himself, Colonel Shaw, now played by Kurt Russell. Shaw sees Kentaro and seems to recognize him, with Kentaro confirming that his name is Kentaro Randa and he's Hiroshi's son. And Kate, she confirms her name is Kate Randa and she's Hiroshi's daughter. And May, absolutely of no relation. Shaw leads them outside and asks them to keep their voices down. Once they're outside, Kate, Kentaro, and May come clean on the files that they found and all the monster stuff that they saw encrypted on the drives. They also talk about how Kate and Kentaro's father, Hiroshi, was on a bush plane that disappeared flying over Alaska, and it's at this moment that May realizes that they're being watched when she finds a camera and it's hidden in a bush. Shaw comes clean and tells them that Monarch is not going to stop. Not until they get what they want. But he also offers that they get out of there immediately and find out what really happened to Hiroshi. Before we get an answer, we switch back to 1952 where we see a young Bill Randa and Keiko caught up in a much bigger problem of trying to get out of the USS Lawton that mysteriously ended up on land. The problem is that they're walking through the corridors and the corridors start moving. What is absolutely a titan trying to open up this tuna can that's between it and its meal. And Randa gets pinned by some debris when we see, by the grace of the writers, Lieutenant Shaw shows up just in the nick of time to help free Randa from the debris, head towards an exit, and finally lead everyone outside of the ship and back on the solid ground. Unfortunately for them, we get an awesome shot of the Muto emerging from the hull of the ship and stretching its wings and showing us that this is about to be a whole problem. They somehow make it back into the forest alive, with Shaw freaking all the way out at the sight of what he calls a dragon flying overhead. And I can't even front. He does kind of look like one of Khaleesi's children when we see the creature in all of its glory right before end credits. And this episode was good. Like, I can't tell you how much I enjoyed watching this and now getting to talk about it with all of you. One of my most surprisingly favorite aspects of this show are the things that have nothing to do with the Mutos, and I'm instead finding myself invested in the mystery of Hiroshi's disappearance. Hiroshi is the son of Bill Randa, and I just need to learn about how the whole dynamic went and how Hiroshi took his life experiences and decided to live life ratchet, choosing to lie to everyone and secretly father two different families with two different women. The tea is so sweet, and the utter disdain and hate that Kate and Kentaro have for one another makes it awkwardly addictive to watch. The whole thing with seeing Shaw and how he's one guy that's played by father and son pair Kurt and Wyatt Russell is kind of cool too, so let's see where it goes. But why is this Muto here and flying in a pattern? Isn't this around the time that Godzilla was still keeping these things in line and not tolerating these kind of outbursts? Well, I don't see no Godzilla to save Bill, Keiko, and Shaw, but I do know that everyone survived, so we'll see how they get out of this one next episode. What do you all think of this new show so far? Are you liking the spiciness with all the ratchet behavior? What do you think about the show's tone and approach so far? Am I the only one who wants to see more Mutos? What do you think of this cast and everyone's performances so far? Look, I'm going to put my written review along with my score at themovieblog.com in the link below. Go ahead and check that out and hit me up in the comments with your thoughts. That's all I have for this one. Thank you all for giving me your valuable time. I'll be back next week to talk about Monarch Episode 3, where we'll pick up where we're leaving off now. Like, subscribe, comment. Otherwise, I'm going to have to check you all later. Peace.